I still wanted to continue searching for that answer. So I had already felt like in my heart I was Muslim, but then practicing Ramadan and having that space to also learn more was really important. So my journey to Islam, because I grew up out in the country and a lot of the people that are there are Caucasian or indigenous. And like I said, we all had a church. So our elementary to high school was Christian Catholic. And so my journey to Islam started when I was in university and going to school in Edmonton. So I went to the University of Alberta. What I did is I started making new friends. I started really spending time alone, spending more time in nature. I started writing poetry to start to heal again from this relationship. I started doing my art more often. And then I started having conversations, really deep conversations with friends about what I believed in. And I started opening up about my spiritual journey and what I believed in regards to angels and things that were happening to me as I was walking towards love. And I had someone come up to me one day and they had said, "Do you know that a lot of what you believe is in the Quran?" And I said, "What's that?" I don't know what that is. So I had sat down with them, arranged time to sit down with them, and asked them all these questions for like 3 hours. I sifted through a book and just took a bunch of notes. And I wanted to know about what this was, the difference between Christianity and Islam, Buddhism and Islam. And okay, now in Islam, um, why are all these different understandings happening, right? And so I just really took the time to do research. And I found that the science part of me was like, okay, I get it. This makes sense. I have all the evidence that I need. And then when it came to my spiritual side, well, I thought, okay, how do I explain all these things that are happening? So I still wanted to continue searching for that answer. In the meantime, I was doing meditation. Um, I was working with crystals, and I was kind of like the new age type of spirituality. And one day in April to 2018, coming up to Ramadan, was actually starting in May. So I was doing all this research coincidentally at a time when it was the holiest month of the year for Muslims. And I was at the mall one day, and this lady, she comes up to me and she says, "Can I tell you something crazy?" And I thought, yeah, sure. Like, really, my life right now is crazy. Like, you can't really surprise me. And she said, "Are you spiritual?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Do you have crystals on you?" And I said, "Yeah, like, here's my amethyst." And I rolled up my sleeves and I showed her all the stuff that I had. And she said to me, she said, "Don't buy into like the new age meditation. Like, be careful with it because there are spirits or entities that you can call in that will be attached to you and that can follow you." And she said something's following you, that she could see it. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound crazy to me. That's what I've been feeling. I actually was planning on going next door to get like the third eye that I heard people in Turkey use for protection, because I was having nightmares like crazy and I couldn't get rid of them, and sleep paralysis, and I didn't understand why it was happening. And so she gave me this prayers on YouTube, and it was called Ayatul Kursi, which is the most powerful verse of the Quran. And I actually, I'm wearing it on my necklace. So it's the most powerful verse because all it does is praise God, and it talks about how he protects the heavens and the earth and he doesn't sleep. And, uh, and so I took it, not knowing what it was, just kind of being curious and saying, yeah, like, why not? Have nothing to lose. So I took it home with me, and all my nightmares went away. What is going on? And so I would play it on YouTube every night. So I would go to sleep. And then I was like, okay, well, now that I'm doing this, let's like, what is it about Muslims and how they pray? Because, a lot of Christians pray on their hands and knees. And in the Bible, it says the true believers pray on their hands and knees. And I'm like, I've never done that. Like, I don't know what that feels like. So, in spirituality, the center of the middle of your forehead is called your third eye. And it's kind of like an awakening, enlightenment. And so when I thought about how Muslims pray and prostrate on the ground, to me, it felt like I was grounding that center, that thought, oh, I know, or this is what's coming through for me and I see with my eyes. I'm grounding that and I'm submitting that to God and asking God to give me what He wanted to see, not what I want. And so I started doing that, and it changed my life. It was like Muslims pray 5 times a day. And so I didn't understand why, but it's according to the sun. And it feels like you're re-energizing, recharging your soul every single time that you pray. And I would notice it because it changes every day with the sun. And I had an app that would tell me when it would go off. And so I would go throughout my day, I'd meet someone amazing and I would speak to them, have a great conversation, and I would be drained. Like, oh my gosh, it must be time to pray soon. Like, can I go pray? And my phone would go off or it would light up. And I would get that confirmation from the divine with like that all the time. And it was happening so often with so many different circumstances. Um, and so I did have an experience when I decided to not play the prayer because I wanted to also take away these things, right? So what happens when I don't pray? What happens when I don't play these prayers? Like, is my life still going to be the same? And so that's, again, the science part of me, like experimenting with like if this is true or not. And so one night I did have a dream, and I won't go into detail, but in the dream I was protecting myself from this entity that was holding me. And I tried to play the prayer in my sleep, and then she put her arms around my throat and my lungs and tried to strangle me in my sleep. And I thought I woke my whole house awake. And that was the moment for me, a milestone where I thought, what is this prayer? Like, what does it even say? And why are these entities so afraid of it? And that's what I needed. That was the one thing that was missing, is like, where is the explanation for the unseen? Where's the protection coming from? And how do I use that in order to protect myself on my own journey? And so I headed into Ramadan of 2018. I had actually, every time we pray, we say our declaration of faith, we say the Shahada. And so that's kind of like the statement that there's no God but one God. And the Prophet ﷺ is the last and final messenger. So we acknowledge all the prophets and accept all of them. And then we also just say that we only worship one God. So you say it during prayer every day, like 10 to 20, 30 times a day. So I had already felt like in my heart I was Muslim, but then practicing Ramadan and having that space to also learn more was really important. And my journey with family and friends definitely changed. So I really want to acknowledge the people that supported me in my journey. Coincidentally, one of the people, their name means call to prayer, which I think is really, really beautiful. So they really helped me with the questions I had. And if they didn't know, they would ask the one that they knew. And I got my first prayer mat from them and my first Eid outfit. So little things like that. And then I also had the Yusuf family, who is a Sudanese Muslim family that took me in when I had gotten displaced from my family on multiple occasions. And so it was really beautiful to have a space where I felt like I was at home.
So, just like any other Muslim women, I uh, I hold dear different identities. uh, I'm Muslim. I'm a woman. I'm a mother. I'm a community advocate, and I'm also a survivor of family violence. Right now, Alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we say, I'm thankful that I'm in a very healthy relationship. But my previous relationship of 18 years, I endured some very unhealthy, toxic situations. And I'm glad that I was able to get out with my 3 boys. And for me, during those times when um, it was kind of some of the darkest days of my life, and what got me through was through writing. I always loved poetry, and I found solace in writing. Um, and I've put together, throughout the years, I've written a number of poems, and um, I'll be having a milestone birthday soon. And I thought, you know, I'm gonna publish this poem. It's as a testament to the time, the dark part of my life, but it also shows that even in the darkest parts, I was able to create something. I had my three boys. Yes, I created my three boys, but I also created these poetry, and I want it to be also like a testament to other women who are enduring, unhealthy relationships. That there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and that uh, there's help if you need to. And I was able to seek that here in Edmonton and get out. And now myself and my kids are thriving, and I'm very happy for that. And the this is just a prototype of the book that I intend to publish. Is called Textures, a collection of feelings from a healing heart. And I use my moniker, Warrior Woman Wati. It's an alliteration, Warrior Woman Wati, but also it was me kind of like taking back this strength, because every time, when people hear about my story, they say, oh, Wati, you're so resilient, you're so strong. And I didn't really grasp that because deep inside I felt broken, right? I was broken. But then I thought, you know what? Yeah, people say that I'm strong, that I'm resilient. So I'm going to reclaim that. I'm going to reclaim that warrior woman in me and say, yes, I went through that and I survived. So I take on this moniker called Warrior Woman Wati, and I'm just going to share with you something here. It's about just, sometimes wanting to just disappear from this world. Um, Have you ever seen yourself in the distance, walking away into the hazy horizon? Do you look different or the same? Do you see color, or are your stripes in black and white? Are there any sounds, like rustling leaves, or just pure silence? Have you imagined yourself breaking away, breaking free, then turning back, waking up to reality when all you want is to disappear? So that was something that I wrote when I was feeling really down. And sometimes, and that's why mental health is important. Mental health for women, especially, is important because when you're in your darkest period, sometimes you just feel like you want to disappear. But in talking to someone and in reaching out, you find that there's hope usually. So I hope that other women will reach out. Um, and this was another one. It's called I Was Happy Once. How many times do I look back to discover only nothingness, an empty shell left on the shelf, hardened and hollow? I wear an armor to protect myself from wounds so deep they pierce my heart. Then sometimes, on precious days full of calm, I think back to the days gone and see my radiant, smiling face. I was happy once. Yeah, it's just sad for you. Yeah.
Today, I don't practice Islam because of how it has affected me as a young girl growing up in a very strict household. Growing up with a father that was a hardcore Muslim and very strict. I want people to know about Islam, that even though I was a young practicing Muslim girl, I no longer practice Muslim now based on the childhood that I experienced with my father. There's nothing wrong with the religion of Islam. It's how it's presented to you. Like if it's force fed into you, that you have to it's spoon fed into you. You have to do it. No choice. You have to go every Sunday. No choice. You have to pray. It didn't come natural. It was something that I had to do because had no choice. So there's per se nothing wrong with the religion of Islam. It's how it was presented to me in my personal experience as a young girl and living in a very strict household with a hardcore, very religious father, but he was very true to it for him, for his own benefit. And he just rubbed it off on the younger two kids, because there's four of us. He rubbed it on the last two because we were at home living with him at the time. And that was my experience, but it doesn't mean that it had to be an experience for the next person.
So with me, I've faced a lot of Islamophobia throughout my life. And I remember the first time I faced it, an example, I was taking my dad to the heart doctor. He was afraid, he wanted someone to go with him. He gets really anxious. And we're sitting at this doctor's office waiting. And I remember there were a lot of people in the waiting room. So he had to sit in a different chair, which I'm very thankful for because he didn't hear what happened next. And I was just sitting, and I think I was in maybe my first year of university. And I had other experiences before, but this one, I don't know, impacted me a lot more. And there were two people sitting next to me, and they saw my boots, and I was wearing combat boots at the time. And they're whispering to each other. And, I said, whatever, it's none of my business. I don't really care. But then they were saying, like, oh, look at her. She just thinks she's still in Iraq and she can kick anyone's balls and no one will care. And I remember being just so shocked because I'm like, what? And I remember, like, the only thing I think that came out of my mouth is, I got these from Spring or something. Like, I got these from Canada. I don't know. That's the only thing I can muster up. And I remember them saying, like, oh, you talk back. You're so disrespectful. And I remember how frustrating I felt because it's like, no matter what I did, it was going to enforce whatever narrative they had in their head. And that feeling it's not like someone calling you a name that impacts you. And like, if they told me, like, oh, you have an ugly shirt or something, it's something more unique than that. It's something that, goes to the core of my identity. And he basically stripped who I was. And I remember feeling like almost like that heartbreak feeling for weeks. Actually, I was so impacted by that. And as time went on and I experienced it more, I kind of just, got used to it. I said, I am who I am. And I think when I got into law school, my first year of law school, that was another shock where I was experiencing it in a different way. It was a lot more covert. They'd say things like, oh, you're so lucky you got in because you get to check a box, or crazy things like that. And I remember really questioning it and thinking, like, if I just took my hijab off, I'm Lebanese, yes, but I could be white passing and that would be easier for me. And I had to have that discussion with myself. But I remember thinking, like, okay, well, that's not fair for my Black sisters who wear the hijab, or others who, they're still going to face that discrimination. And I remember thinking, okay, yes, it will be easy for me, but I won't be happy. And, life's so short. I just want to live for myself. So often in life, the harder decision is the right one. So I did stick with it, and it did help build my resilience. But I always try to remember how that felt. So when I'm helping my clients who are just experiencing it for the first time, or experiencing much worse than what I've went through, that I can do my best to advocate for them. But I'll say, when I face discrimination, or just, words or whatever outside when I'm walking, it really frustrates me in the sense that I feel like it's stripping my autonomy. Because when I walk through the street, I don't want to have to think, okay, is this guy a bad guy? Because even in Islam, we're not supposed to make assumptions. I should always assume the best in people, and I want to assume the best in people. But when we're seeing these random attacks, it really sucks that when I walk through the street, the question on my mind is, okay, is this person going to attack?
I have a story actually to tell you about when I was working at the airport, and my job was to help people with taking them from the wheelchair, in the wheelchair from the airplane to where they have to go. And one day, this elderly man came out, and he was pushing me, and I had the wheelchair ready, and I was like, "Okay, sir," and I tried to adjust it so that I can get him, maybe comfortably sitting. And he kept doing this, and then there was a line forming on the tarmac. And I was like, "It's okay, sir." So I kept backing up, and I'm like, "It's okay. Don't worry. I can take you. I'm strong. I do this all day. I'll be able to push you," because he was a little large. And he just kept doing it. And so my coworker comes down and she's like, what's the holdup? And I'm like, I don't know. He keeps doing this. And she's like, okay, sir, I need you to sit down. I need you to sit in your chair. And he kind of like shuffled away around and he went and whispered something in her ear. And she was like, no, if you don't want to sit down, you need to walk. And I remember looking at her and then thinking to myself, like, does he not want me to push him? And I told her, I said, it's okay, just take him. Because she was upset for me, but I'm looking at him like, you're old. You're clearly not able to walk up the tarmac by yourself. So, again, with my religion and my culture, we're taught to respect our elders. So for me, it was like, it's okay. You know what? Don't worry about it. So she was like, are you sure? And then I said, yeah, no, don't worry about it. And then he sat down and she looked at me again and she said, I'm sorry. And at this point, I'm embarrassed at the lineup that's forming because everybody's seeing this. I wasn't really upset until I was upset because I was wondering to myself, is it because I'm Muslim? Is it because I'm Black? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it all of them? Like how are you refusing help from somebody because of their race, because of their religion? You need me. I don't need you. You need me to help you. And I'm here to help and I'm happy to help, not just because it was my job to do so, but I would do the same thing on the streets. If I saw somebody needed help, that's what I would do for them. So I couldn't imagine. And this was like 2018. So again, the same question I had 10 years prior when I came here and said, people are still asking me in 2008. Now it's 2018 and I'm being treated this way openly. And then now in 2020, when you hear all these things that were happening to our Muslim sisters on the streets, the attack at Southgate Mall. I know the family personally, and I walk by there all the time, and I shop there, and I can't imagine that would happen to me. And now I'm, looking over my shoulders, and every time someone cuts me off, and when I'm driving, and I'm thinking, and I don't want to think like that. I don't want to victimize myself and think, oh, everyone's being racist and everyone, I understand sometimes people stare at you. When I met some people that came from Africa, like some of my relatives, and they would just stare at us all the time. And we tell my mom, like, why are they looking at us? Like, what, they wouldn't say anything. And then my sister, who had been to Africa already, she goes, they're looking at your mouth. They're looking to see the way you talk because you sound like you're talking Chinese to them. Like, they don't understand. So they're just trying to, like, oh, how's she moving her lips? And I get it. I understand because I do the same thing when I see somebody who's speaking a different language I don't know. I do. I kind of just want to, especially if you want to look at them to learn, you got to see how they're moving their mouth and how they're pronunciating and stuff. So I get all of that.
His Highness the Aga Khan, who's the current Ismaili Imam, has this quote that I use, and I start my anti-racism class, but a bunch of my other classes actually, with this quote. And it talks about how one of the things about the world that we live in right now is that as things have gotten more complex, we want to retreat inward. The more diversity we're confronted with, the more complicated it seems. And humans don't deal with dissonance well. And so we want to kind of scrunch inward. And we know more, but about kind of like these small siloed things, right? He says we know more and more about less and less. And what he says is that results in knowledge gaps. And so when I think about what it means to build community and justice, that is where I go first. And so a lot of my work is about teaching and education and kind of this work that I do where I help people learn about Islam, about Muslims, about anti-racism, about mental health, about all of these things that I think there are real knowledge gaps. And I want to believe that people are responding in the ways that they are because they just don't know better sometimes. And so closing those knowledge gaps, I think, is a huge piece. And the other part is, I think, closing empathy gaps. And so knowledge can do that on its own. Sometimes when we know better, we do better, right, Maya Angelou? And so I think that that's absolutely true. But I also think that like actively teaching people about empathy is a big part of my work too. I think we all theoretically understand what empathy is, right? I think we all theoretically understand that we want to know how someone else feels and be able to respond from that place. But in practice, we really struggle with it conceptually. And so I teach like a 90-minute session, like at least once a month, where all I do is teach empathy. Because I think it's such a critical skill that we're missing. And when I teach my anti-racism class, on Monday, my partner in the practice and I were in Red Deer teaching a session about Muslim mental health. But in all of these sessions, I always start with at least an hour on empathy. Because before I give you content, before I teach you about anti-Indigenous racism, or before I teach you about Muslim mental health, or before I teach you about whatever psychoeducational thing I want to do, we can't do that work if we haven't built the foundation of empathy first. Even as a professor, that's where I start. I start with empathy because to learn about religion, you have to be willing to actually enter into the world of another. And so when I think about what it means to build community and justice, that is where I always start, with empathy as the foundation. And honestly, it's the foundation of my practice as a therapist too. So my practice is called Rahma. And Rahma in Islam is the word that we use for Allah's loving compassion. This kind of encompassing notion of a divine whose very nature is to be loving, compassionate. And what does it mean for us as humans to reflect that quality? And for me, that's what empathy is. It's how we reflect Rahma.
As the face of KidFit, I feel like I have the responsibility to give back to my community, to inspire the youth around me, and get the non-Muslims and Muslims to come together. For like example, I run tournaments with over 100 players. 50% are Muslims, 50% are non-Muslims, and at the end of the day, we're all coming together to play this one sport, whether it's basketball, soccer, or ball hockey. We're all coming together and showcasing that sports are so diverse, and we're all coming together to do one thing at the end of the day. Yeah, so we have 12 teams today. There are 21 games, and they're all playing for a cash prize of $1,000. I started this 2 years ago. This is my second annual soccer tournament. So I initially started this to get the community together, but it's expanded and it's become a lot more diverse. There's a lot of non-Muslims and Muslims, so we're all coming together and all playing one sport. This is my 5th tournament so far. I've done 2 basketball ones. This is my 2nd soccer one, and I've done a ball hockey one. I began this 2 years ago, and it's expanded a lot since. I started my very first tournament. I started with just under 40 people, and today we have over 100 players. So yeah, it's going well, and I'm getting everybody together just through soccer and physical activity, and
Yeah, thank you. So I understand that it's not necessarily just Muslims who are here. There are people from non-Muslim communities as well that are invited and do participate. So tell me how you got into sports and physical activity, and like what sparked the passion for you to want to organize KidFit and organize something like this in our city?
So initially, I came out of high school not knowing what I wanted to do, and I went to the personal fitness trainer program at NATE, and I took a business course there, and it kind of forced us to get outside of our comfort zone and make a business. So that's what made me start KidFit, and yeah, it's going awesome so far. We're getting the community together, we're getting different colors, races, and everything all together and playing one sport.
Look at our history, we're a policy-based organization, and everything that we do is thinking from a place of policy. For example, it was ASAC that established the first anti-racism advisory committee. It was also ASAC that lobbied and really challenged the city when it comes to the establishment of the anti-racism strategy. We were happy to see that our mayor committed to the 100-day anti-racism strategy, and he implemented community recommendation that led to the decade of people of African descent. And that also led to challenging the province of Alberta, what the province of Alberta is doing for Black Muslim women, because there's been a lot of disservice and disappointment there. And then to the extent of also lobbying and challenging the federal government for the prioritization and promotion of when it comes to protecting Muslim women of African descent. The essence of it is humanity.
We're not here to separate ourselves based on what we look like.
To listen to what actually the community wants and needs.
Well, we have to be willing to learn.
We're all human. We all desire love, respect,